My name is Dr. Shannon Coates. Please feel free to call me Shannon. And I am coming to you live from a little town north of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. And these are the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Wendake Neo-Wentzio peoples. And I am grateful to live and work on them. Today, I'm a voice educator, a developer of pedagogy resources for voice teachers. The next thing that is coming up that you might want to get into, if you want to, the next thing that is coming up is the Vocal Instrument 101 Live, which is a full weekend of anatomy and physiology delivered through a non-prescriptive / student-centered pedagogical lens. So that's good times if you have ever wondered what it's like to get your anatomy and physiology information from someone who's likely working with the same singers that you work with or has, and also who's done some thinking about that. How do we deliver anatomy and physiology in a non-prescriptive way? So in a non-like, hey, you must be aligned in this way in order to sing properly. This is the proper breathing methodology. Here's what the cricothyroid and the thyroarytenoid must do in order for you to have this sound. So if you've ever wondered how anatomy and physiology can be delivered without that prescriptive lens, check it out. Okay, what are we doing today? We are talking today, this is my live office hours. I also, yes, that's the other thing I do, live office hours, a couple times a month on Fridays, around 11. Sometimes in a different time, but you know, today's 11-ish, so welcome. I call this one Train the Whole Body for a Whole Voice. So the impetus for this live office hours, it was a little bit of a conversation with some wonderful voice teachers in one of the voice forums on Facebook around developing foundations and strengthening specific sets of muscles and isolation work when we're teaching singing. So the isolation exercises, or strengthening head voice so that you can have a strong mix. Strengthening chest voice so that you can have a strong head voice, if you will. Or strengthening certain muscles or muscle groups so that you can have specific kinds of tonal outcomes. And I said in that comment, I really understand the appeal of the idea of if we strengthen these things, or if we build these foundational coordination, which coordinations isn't a noun, but I made it into one, you're welcome. If we build these coordinations into our teaching, if we teach with the idea that we're going to build these coordinations, that will then lead to this whole body singing. I want to develop these coordinations along the way, and then we put it all together in the end. And in my post yesterday, I talked about this as the sort of wax on, wax off, like the Karate Kid kind of philosophy around pedagogy. And so I understand the appeal of the wax on, wax off pedagogical approach, because what that appeals to in me specifically, and in voice teachers who I talk to all the time, is if I just know all of the exercises or all of the ways that I can strengthen specific parts of the voice, and if I get this sort of methodology, if I have this like, okay, I work this, and then I work this, and then we work this, and then we develop this, and then we have this, and now we've got the foundation, and now they can sing, I get how appealing that philosophy is, and how appealing that kind of, and hopeful it is. It feels very hopeful to me too. I feel like, oh, if only there was a checklist of all of the exercises that I could do, and if I did all of those exercises, and the singer, like I gave those exercises to the singers I'm working with, then they would acquire all of these very specific skills, and then they'll be able to sing better, right? I get that appeal. There's a lot of comfort in this checklist approach, and get it. And also the philosophy behind that pedagogical approach is incompatible with how we actually acquire complex skills and how we learn, frankly. The philosophy behind that approach, here are all of the steps to follow, and then you will be here. That sort of pedagogical philosophy, that educational philosophy, that is really incompatible with the way that humans learn, and especially with the way that humans acquire complex motor skills, such as singing. So let's get into it a little bit, shall we? All right. what we're talking about when we're talking about isolation exercises or breaking down technique into small parts and practicing those individual parts. So two ways we do this. The first way is that we think about strengthening muscles. So we think about strength exercises. And this comes out of, anecdotally speaking, I have not looked at any research or data. So here's what I think. This goes out of completely anecdotal. You're welcome. So don't say that's what it is. Just say Shannon thinks this is what it is. Maybe leave me out of it entirely. It seems logical to me that this kind of comes out of our understanding of sport physiology and sport exercises and the way we train sports and athletes. We don't train sports, we train athletes to play sports. Right. And you've likely heard singers be described as vocal athletes, which can be a very useful concept and also is problematic. Okay, so we strengthen muscles. In sports training, we think of strengthening muscles. We outsiders think of strengthening muscles so that they'll be better sportsers, right? They'll be better at their sport. And that's a misunderstanding. The only time that we are bulking up muscles or that strengthening exercises or bulking up exercises where I'm strengthening the muscles is actually going to make me a better sportser is if my actual sport is lifting heavy things or pushing heavy things. That's the only time that the kind of like strengthening, bulking up kind of exercises are actually going to directly contribute to me being better at my sport. So, for example, if I'm a baseball player and I'm gonna get totally in the weeds here. Feel free to call me out because I don't know sportsy sports. But say I'm a baseball, you know what? I know a little bit about running. Let's say I want to be a better runner. Great. Maybe I go to the gym and I do some like thigh, like whatever those things are, you know, the things where my thighs are going to bulk up. Maybe I go to the gym and I get my calf muscles a little stronger. I bulk up my calf muscles a little bit. Sure, bulking up those muscles are not going to make me a better runner. They may help me to find different kinds of coordinations in my actual running, but the actual muscle being stronger itself is not useful to me directly as a runner. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, when we're talking about singing, nothing in singing is a push or pull or lift muscular activity. Nothing in singing is about bulk or strength. Let me say this again. The muscles we use for singing are not bulkable muscles. They're not muscles that we can build up and get bulkier for more strength. The cricothyroid muscle, the thyroarytenoid muscle, the diaphragm, all of the muscles that we think of. Also, we tend to say things like, well, let's get the head voice stronger. And so we need to do head voice exercises so that the CT, the cricothyroid muscle, which is primarily responsible for stretching the vocal folds and related to upper register tonal outcomes. If we strengthen that CT muscle, we do the exercise to strengthen the CT muscle, then we will have better head voice. No, that's not the way it works because the CT muscle is not a bulkable muscle. The more exercises you do to get the CT muscles stronger, that's actually not a thing. They're not like, those muscles are not like your, whatever this thing is. What's that thing called? Whatever that thing is. These are not bulkable muscles. Same with the diaphragm. It is not a bulkable muscle. It is not a muscle that we are, in fact, if I remember correctly, I think it's the thinnest, one of the thinnest muscles in the body. And we don't want it to get thicker because thicker doesn't mean stronger in terms of these muscles. When we're doing breathing exercises to strengthen the diaphragm, that is a misnomer. That is mythology. We are not strengthening the diaphragm. The diaphragm is not a bulkable muscle. It's not a thing. Strength training doesn't make you better at your sport unless your sport is lifting heavy things. And singing is not a sport in that sense. We are not lifting heavy things. We are not pushing heavy things. So that, for me, that's the main issue with the bulking or the strength training type exercises we tend to do in singing, or the way we talk about those exercises maybe. The issue is that A, you're not doing lifting and pushing with the muscles of the vocal tract or even the body in terms of breathing and support, if you will. So those muscles there's no way to get them stronger in order to help singing. And secondly, the intrinsic muscles of the larynx, the diaphragm, etc., they're not bulkable muscles anyway. Theodora, yes, this is so true and so important for voice trainers to hear. The muscle fibers in the CT, like you mentioned, are some of the thinnest layered in. Yes, they absolutely are, right? So these are very, very thin little muscles and they do their jobs really, really well, and you can't actually bulk them. Also, you don't want to. Because that's not what they do. So we just get that mixed up in our heads a little bit, right? We misunderstand the purpose of the musculature. I think it's because we've had this kind of crossover with sport physiology and sports exercises and sport training. We've had this kind of like crossover without realizing that we're taking something in or information in that actually is not applicable to what we do. We're like, yes, we're vocal athletes. Not in that sense. The second kind of isolation exercise is more about the sort of learn a coordination. So we isolate a specific kind of coordination in the wax on, wax off way. Karate Kid, got the Karate Kid in there. So in that wax on, wax off way. So the coordination exercises tend to be, say, we want to do exercises for tongue root release. We want to do exercises, I'm just looking at my list, jaw release. We want to do breathing exercises, not necessarily to strengthen the diaphragm, but to learn how to breathe for singing. Right? We do head voice exercises. We do chest voice exercises. And even when we're not thinking about, like, are we strengthening the cricothyroid? Are we strengthening the thyroarytenoid? Like, even when we're not thinking specifically about muscles, when we're thinking specifically about a coordination, an overall coordination, we take those coordinations out and try to strengthen those. We do exercises for that. SOVT exercises are a kind of isolation exercise, which, and don't get me wrong, I love me some SOVT exercise. I love straw work with lots of caveats. So maybe we want to have better vocal fold closure, and so we do some onset exercises to train a better vocal fold closure. Maybe we want to train the tongue to work independently so that we can use the tongue to not only shape the resonator, but also for articulations. So we might do some exercises for an independent tongue. These are all good exercises, These are all well-known, these are all exercises that we use all the time. And these are all specific kinds of isolation exercises. So what is the misunderstanding there, Shannon? Why are you being so mean to me about my isolation exercises? I am not being mean to you. I am saying, here's the misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is that if I isolate this skill, if I break down all of the things that are happening and I isolate this skill and we get that exercise and I do the thing over and over and over again, I do my SOVT exercise, I do my or this, or I do my inhalation. If I do all of those exercises, I isolate it, then magically it will appear in my singing. That's the misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is how we actually learn. So here's what happens. When I learn a coordination in isolation, when I learn whatever the coordination is in isolation, my brain files that as a thing I can do. My body files that as a thing I can do. My body's like, oh good, now you know how to really inhale and expand, and everything expands when you inhale. That's great. My brain, my cognitive, cognitive, awake, explicit, outside, whatever that is, that part of the brain is like, no, we know that we can do this in singing now. But my body does not know that yet. My body has not experienced that yet. All that my body has experienced is me doing an SOVT exercise. That's all my body has experienced, is like this neutral laryngeal position perhaps, and a balanced air pressure through my SOVT exercise or my straw work or whatever it is. And now I've got this really balanced, if you will, flowing kind of outcome. And my body's like, great, that's how we do that. That's the one, I know how to do that. Cognitively, in my brain, in my consciousness, in my conscious brain, I'm like, yes, so now we can do it in singing. And we as singing teachers misunderstand because we say, well, they've got all the pieces of the puzzle, now they can put it all together. It's not how brains work. It's not how we work. It's not how we learn. At least that's not how we learn most effectively. We often get there, but for the most part, that's not the way we learn. So we learn this in voice science, but I think the recent trend of exercise science, yes, in voice pedagogy has some taking the parallels a bit too far, and not intentionally, exactly, it's not intentional. Part of it is that no one is saying this explicitly. No one is saying, oh, by the way, here are the things that you have to do in order to make this useful for singing. For the actual singing. Here's how we learn, right? Like, it isn't always taught with these caveats, right? We take these exercise, exactly the exercise science, and we take it into voice pedagogy, and we go like, well, here's what we do. I think this comes out of exercise science. I think this also comes out of our diagnose and prescribe pedagogical philosophy, right? So it comes out of medicine as well, the medicine field, where we say, well, I figure out what's wrong, and then I prescribe the medicine, which is the exercise. I get the right exercise, and then that changes how you sing. So the diagnose and prescribe thing is there, and also it is very exciting. Again, there's a huge appeal there for the structure and for the I have answers. That is hugely appealing. That is very appealing to folks. What happens when we apply this without intention, when we don't actually understand fully the repercussions of just applying exercises. So singers get frustrated because they can do the exercise in isolation, but it doesn't work in their actual singing. Singers get frustrated because we keep telling them what to do. We keep telling them how they can fix something, and then it's not actually fixing the thing because they can do it in isolation. They can do the actual exercise, but they can't actually make it work in their singing. It's not actually changing the thing in their singing. We get frustrated. We get into this terrible power over kind of cycle where I go like, well, here's what's wrong with you. I diagnose, and then I prescribe the thing. I tell you what the exercise is that you need to use in order to fix the thing that's wrong with you. I prescribe the thing, and then I tell you how many times to do it. I don't tell you how you're going to know when the exercise has been successful. In some cases, I don't know myself. In some cases, I'm just like, if we do this exercise 5 times, then you should be better, because I don't know myself what I'm actually listening for, right? In lots of cases, I don't know how I can tell when the exercise has actually been successful. So we don't tell singers when the exercise has been successful. And then we're like, okay, great, now let's sing. And then when it doesn't work in the singing, we get unbelievable imposter syndrome, right? We get so like, wait, how come that didn't work? That was supposed to work. That SOVT exercise was supposed to work. We entrained the tongue to be independent. Why is the tongue getting all involved in the resonance again? We did all of those jaw releasing exercises. Why is the jaw tensing up every time they start to sing? I did the head voice strengthening exercises. We got the head voice so strong. Now they still can't do a mix. I mean, let me also just say, if you're only working through a laryngeal registration lens in terms of like either work CT or TA, you are missing a whole bunch of information about how registration works and resonance works. You're back in the 90s, my friend. Let's get up into the 2020s. Come do the Vocal Instrument 101 and learn about acoustic registration, because if you're only thinking about laryngeal registration right now, you are missing a big chunk. It's going to be frustrating for you. So come and do the Vocal Instrument 101 and learn a little bit more about acoustic registration. I promise you, it's so validating when you learn about acoustic registration and you understand, oh, right, that's why. I promise, it's so validating. So we get this incredible imposter syndrome because it's not working the way that we were told that it was supposed to work. And also, I did all of the right things and it's still not working, or it only worked once. And then there are 2 ways that goes, right? We get imposter syndrome and we blame ourselves for not having enough information. I gotta take Shannon's course, I gotta get more information, I gotta go get another textbook, I've gotta do all of those things. And we blame the student, right? We blame the student. We're like, well, I did everything right, and so they clearly aren't practicing enough, they clearly aren't teachable. We go into the forums and we say, how do you make a student do this thing? What are the exercises you use to make sure a student can do this thing? It's really hard teaching that way, my friends. It's very hard teaching that way. It's hard on us, it's hard on the singers we work with. We go into teaching day feeling scared, anxious about, like, I hope I can offer everything they need. I hope I've got all the information I need for them to have a good lesson. I hope I can give them what they need. We go into teaching that way, don't we? I know we do. Or we go into teaching going, God, this student is like the worst. They never listen, they never do what I tell them to do, and that's our explanation for why it's not working. And in some cases, perhaps that's true, but also, let's look at our pedagogy, right? Let's look at what we actually are offering to the singers we're working with. Not in a imposter syndrome way, not in a, wow, I really need more anatomy and physiology. I wish I had all of the exercises in XYZ book memorized so that I could just like pull them out exactly as soon as I needed them, right? We blame the singer, and then the singers we're working with get frustrated with themselves, or you, right? And they end up doing these exercises. Chris Johnson mentioned this in the post yesterday too. They end up doing exercises over and over and over again. They're so bored. And we're bored. Everybody's bored by these exercises, but they're the right exercises. Like, you have issues with breathy voice, so we have to do onset exercises. Let's keep going on the onset exercises. And they're just doing these exercises over and over and over again. It's so boring, which is also a kind of power over. I've got all the information and I'm going to tell you what to do so that you can fix your life. All right, what do we do instead? First thing we do instead is we recognize, we get it in our bones. We recognize that the muscles we use in singing are not bulkable muscles. That strength training in singing is a myth. It's not a real thing. In the sense that we think of it in sports or in, like weightlifting or whatever. In that sense, it is not a real thing. We are not bulking the muscles of any of the muscles that we use for singing. Any of the, especially the intrinsic muscles of the larynx. We're not bulking those. And the diaphragm is not a bulkable muscle. It's not a thing. not a thing. So first of all, recognize that. And then let's do some pedagogy. Let me give you 3 pedagogy principles to think about or consider. 3 pedagogy principles. Here we go. Find over fix. As I have mentioned before, this is a pedagogy principle that I was reaching for quite a long time. A couple years back, I heard Cindy Dewey talk about it, and so then I stole it. So thank you, Cindy. Find over fix. So part of what happens is that we think my job is to figure out what's wrong, figure out what isn't working well in your singing, figure out which muscles or which coordinations aren't doing what they should be doing, get the right exercise for you to be able to do the thing that you need to do, and then have you do those exercises in isolation, and then we will fix whatever is wrong. That's the diagnose and prescribe methodology. And when we start to think about how we actually learn and how the body learns most effectively, how we learn most effectively, and we think about pedagogy, if we start to say, every time I think to myself, this is something that's wrong, or here's a thing that needs to be fixed, or this thing is weak, or this thing isn't working. See if you can think, where is it happening? At least some. Where is some of that happening? Where is it working to a certain extent? Where is it working 25% of the time? What do I want more of, and where is it working 25% of the time? Where is that actually happening? So if we are thinking, I want to do exercises for stronger vocal fold closure, for example, like I want to do onset exercises for stronger vocal fold closure, rather than assigning an exercise for stronger vocal fold closure, what might be more useful is let's figure out the place where you are at least 50% or 60% toward the vocal fold closure we're looking for. So I want more vocal fold closure, meaning I want more robustness in the sound usually. I want a stronger sound, if you will. And so where in the singing already do we have some of that? Find. We're going to find first. So as soon as I think about fixing something, I'm going to go back and find the thing. So or if I feel like we need to find a better balance or a better flow, the first thing is like, I got to fix that. And so let's use the SOVT exercise to find a better laryngeal balance or pressurization balance, if you will, however you want to parse this. Where are they doing this already? And then we want to scaffold from that. When I'm working with voice teachers, one of the things that happens quite a lot is we scaffold, but we make the steps this big, and the steps need to be this big. This is also related back to Curse of the Expert, right? We're a little bit Curse of the Expert, where we think, oh, good, you can do this thing, now you can do this thing, because it's so long ago that we learned that thing that we don't remember all of the little tiny steps that needed to be in place to get to the new thing. Like, we don't remember how long it took us to get to that new thing. We don't remember how much back and forth it took us to get to the new thing, right? We forget, and we're like, oh, jump to this thing. So what will happen is this. We find maybe 60 to 75% of the thing that we're looking for, of that coordination we're looking for, in some other place in the song, or maybe in an exercise. And we say, oh, great, now do it here, rather than only changing one thing at a time. For me, that's the principle behind the scaffolding, making the scaffolding really, really small steps, only change one thing at a time. So when you see that someone has acquired the skill, or 75% of the skill, when you see that they've acquired that much of the skill in that area, take that little area out, or take that little part of the song, or take that part of the exercise out and change one thing. So maybe we change the vowel that they're using. Maybe we change the pitch range that they're using. Like maybe we go up a semitone. Maybe we go from an SOVT, like maybe we go from a tongue trill to an oo vowel, or maybe we go from a straw to an oo vowel, because oo vowel is, in a way, it's a semi-occluded vocal tract, in a way, or an E vowel can be, but E doesn't have the lips, right? So only change one thing, and you're going to get the steps so small that by the time you get to using whatever that skill is, or whatever that coordination is in the actual singing that you want to do, the body will have transferred all of the learning over to the singing, because the body will have learned it. So if we only have that thing in isolation where we're like, yes, you got it, perfect, now sing waitress, sing the whole thing, and remember to use that thing. The body's like, there's no connection between this skill I just learned and put into my little box of skills. I put it in here and I labeled it. There's no connection between that thing and now I'm singing waitress. So what do? I take that little tiny skill that I learned here, it's 60%, I've got the vocal direct, whatever it is, I've got like 60% of it, 75% of it, and then maybe I go in semitones up to down to the pitch range of the section of waitress that I want to sing it in. I'm not going to go to the whole song because my body is not knowing yet that this can be transferred over to this song. It doesn't know yet. So I'm going to move very gradually, and then maybe I might then change the tune, or I might add some notes to whatever it was that we were doing that are similar to whatever the notes were in that section that I want to apply it to in Waitress, etc., etc. So we make the step, only change one thing at a time. And when you change something, and now we went from having it a 75% acquired skill in the last thing, and now I've only got 25%, you've gone too far. The step is too big. That's fine. That doesn't mean they didn't learn the thing. They learned the thing. They go back to the former step and see if you can make the scaffolding even smaller. Get it back to 75% or 80% learned, and then come back over. Then take a little tiny step. Little tiny step. Only change one thing. Only change one thing. Only change one thing. Only change tiny steps. Scaffolding. Small step scaffolding. Only change one thing at a time. The third, feedback-based directives. So as you are working toward acquiring this skill so that we know it in a way that we can apply it in the song, asking the singer what it feels like, how they know that it's better, how they know it's at 75%, asking them what percentage they're at. Are you at 50% right now? Are you at 60%? Tell me how, like out of 10, how successful that was. That will allow you then to create directives that is based on their feedback rather than your perception. Which is so important, because remember how I was saying at the beginning that we do these exercises and no one in the room knows when they're successful? And so students are like, I guess I just keep singing this for 10 times and then I've learned it. Okay, good. I did skills for 15 minutes, so I must be good at them now. Don't know, right? So if I am continually eliciting feedback, was that at 65%? And then how do you know? I can start to then give the directive, and how much more gummy can that be? How much more intense can that be? How much more in the front of the face can that be? And all of those are based on the feedback that the singer gave me rather than my perception, which may or may not be useful to the singer in terms of directives. So what that does is it allows for the singer to really get kind of interested in what the actual process is and how they will know, and self-assessment, understanding when they're successful and when they're not. And also it gives them the tools to be able to do it at home. It means that the singer at home is not thinking, what would Shannon say? Shannon said this one was really good, but I'm not really sure why. I'm just going to try to get it back to what Shannon said. Not successful, not useful. But if the singer has been describing their process, and if we've been doing some feedback elicitation, I don't think elicitation is a word, you're welcome, some lovely feedback eliciting, then that communicates and models for the singer that they are able to do this at home on their own. They don't need someone, they don't need a power over, they don't need the person on the outside to say, yes, that was right, or yes, that was wrong, or no, that was wrong. Here's another exercise. They can go within themselves and they can figure out the exercise for themselves, what they need to do. So I'm not saying that we should never do exercises, obviously, or that we should never use straws. I love straws. Lots of people don't love them. But sometimes people say, oh, I hate straws. I think that they're just a tool to like just prop you up, right? And so if you can only do it with a straw, then it's a terrible tool. Yeah, no, it's a tool that's being used wrong. It's a great tool, but you got to know how to use it. You got to know how to transfer that learning into the singing. Of course it's going to be a terrible tool if the only thing we do is tell them how to use the straw and then don't support singers to figure out how that coordination can be transferred into singing. Of course it's a terrible tool. Anyway, so maybe we do use a straw exercise in isolation. Maybe we do some tongue independence work in isolation. Maybe we do some jaw release in isolation. Sure, maybe we even start the whole lesson with this. What do? I elicit feedback about the success of this. So we say, that jaw release seems really fabulous. How does it feel for you? Yeah, it feels better, Good, how do you know? What can you do now that you couldn't do before? Oh, well, I think I can, well, great. What part of what song would you like to use that in? So now I'm applying that directly to my singing. So let's do a little wrap up. In general, when we talk about working in isolation, when we talk about strengthening exercises or isolating muscles or using exercises that are isolation exercises in order to strengthen or build, we're talking about two different kinds of isolation exercises. One of them is the bulking up kind of isolation exercise, and that one is not useful for singing in general, the bulk up type of exercises. Or we're talking about an exercise where we're isolating a coordination or building a foundation of a coordination in order to be able to do further, perhaps more complex, etc. Rather than assigning an exercise, We find where the singer is already doing the thing to a certain extent. They don't have to be doing it perfectly. They don't have to be doing it fully effectively every single time or in the entire range. That's not the point. Let me use the example of like a high belt. So we've got a singer working on a high belt, and that high belt is really pushed. There's too much pressurization, or maybe it's the shaping is too open, or whatever. I don't have to know physiologically what's happening in order to be able to work with that singer to find a different kind of coordination for that belt. All I need to know, where in their range, or on a different vowel, or in a different song, are they already doing or close to doing what they actually want to do? That's all I need to know. I don't need to know physiologically what's happening. I don't actually need to have any exercises in my back pocket at all. What do I need to know? I need to know, where are they already halfway there? But Shannon, of course they can do a really good mixed belt on an A4. It's low. And they can't do a really good mixed belt on a C5. It's too high. That's where they're yelling. I know. But the body knows the coordination on an A4. So what am I going to do? I'm going to figure out what is the coordination that we're using there on that A4, and how does it feel? And let's figure out how you're going to describe that. Great, now let's do maybe a little steps and tell me about that second one. Was it 65% what you wanted? Was it 80% what you wanted? It was 80%? Terrific, let's go up a step. Okay, we gotta start that first one. And then we build into the C. This is the way the body brain works. This is how we learn. We learn by building on the thing we already know how to do. Learn most effectively, most efficiently, rather than learning an exercise to isolate the coordination, learn the coordination all on its own, and then somehow magically get it to appear back in the singing. Very tricky, very tricky. I hope that's been useful. Some things to think about. And I hope in some ways that is also validating. There is a relief that comes in when we start to say, oh, maybe I'm not doing it wrong, right? Like, oh, maybe those exercises are useful. Like, everybody was telling me that the SOVT exercise is the best thing since sliced bread, but I can't seem to get it to do anything for any of the singers I'm working with. Oh, it's because no one actually told me how to do it. The pedagogy, how to use it, how to teach it, how we learn. No one told me that. That's a big part. No wonder the exercise wasn't working. It's not something that's wrong with me. That could be very validating. Terrific. Talk to you later. Boop.